The WWF's New Generation era seems to get a bad rep among the vast majority of wrestling fans. Common bad characters that get brought up are the likes of Mantar, Duke the Dumpster Droese, Thurman Sparky Plug, and Isaac Yankem DDS, and absolutely, these gimmicks are terrible and they deserve to get ripped apart. I wouldn't say there's a charm to the bad characters of the New Generation, but they do have a weird value to people who want to explore the WWF's history. They kinda epitomise how ridiculous and goofy the company could be, and they also provide a stark contrast for characters of the Attitude Era. There's nothing remotely endearing about Mantar or Friar Ferguson, but these kind of characters provide us with some fun discussion topics, and they let us see on TV how completely out of touch the WWF were at the time, even for the mid-90s. Some of these characters just wouldn't fit in any era of pro wrestling. Along with the aforementioned hilarious characters of the New Generation, there were also some bad matches put on TV, and there were also some bad matches that the WWF thought fans would actually pay for. There's no denying that some of the bouts that were showcased in both the mid-card and main events simply weren't good, especially when compared to the previous generation and what other companies were doing. So the bad matches mixed in with the bad characters leave fans of today and even fans of the past with a pretty bad opinion of the New Generation, generally speaking. The thing is though, there were also a ton of good things that came out of the era, including the rise of legitimately good wrestlers, and there were also some exceptional matches mixed in with the bad. I don't believe the New Generation was as awful as others make it out to be. There's maybe more bad than good throughout the era, but some of the good stuff really stands the test of time, and some of the matches of the era, I feel, are essential viewing for modern wrestling fans. You also have quite a few wrestlers who thrived in the era and became legends of the business as time went on. Guys like Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Ramon, The Undertaker, even Stone Cold Steve Austin at the tail end of the New Generation. All these guys were working hard before the New Generation, but in the mid-90s, they became true superstars, with quite a few going on to make an impact during the Attitude Era. So we gotta take the rough with the smooth. We're gonna take a look at some of the worst matches of the era, but to counter that, we'll also look at some of the best matches. And what you'll hopefully realise today is that there truly was two sides of the same coin when it came to the WWF's New Generation. Great wrestlers had both good and bad matches during this time period. I tried to think of the best way to put together this video, and what I'll do is look at a wrestler from the New Generation and pick out a good match and a bad match for that superstar. We'll look at 10 standout wrestlers of the era, so we'll take a brief look at 20 matches today that took place during the New Generation. Big Diesel spent nearly a whole year as the leader of the New Generation, and while many like to highlight Diesel's shortcomings as champion, he also had quite a few good matches that should get highlighted. His final WWF pay-per-view match of the New Generation against Shawn Michaels was great. This one took place at Good Friends, Better Enemies, and his match against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 12 is a sleeper hit that's surprisingly good, especially for two big men in the ring. But the match I'm going to put forward here, and the one I recommend checking out, would be his no-holds-barred match against Bret Hart at Survivor Series 1995. I covered this one in depth already on the channel, so check that out if you want the full story. But this was a pretty unique match for 1995 standards, where things got really physical and we got to see the old Diesel, the ass kicker who debuted as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard. Although he loses in the end, Diesel looked like $1 million here, and while many will give credit to Bret, Kevin put in the work too. And it turns out that Diesel's best matches of the New Generation was when he actually lost the belt, along with the right to call himself the leader of the era. If we want to talk about a bad Diesel match during the New Generation, many would point out Mabel vs Diesel at SummerSlam 1995, but I'm going to go with Diesel vs Sid at the first In Your House event. I'm a fan of both of these guys, but I'm not a fan of their work together. The In Your House series started during the New Generation, but somehow the first ever In Your House main event turned out to be a complete shit show that dragged on. It ended in a disqualification too, setting up a lumberjack match for In Your House 2 that also failed to set the wrestling world on fire. Avoid all Nash vs Sid matches actually, at all costs. Taker has been through the Golden Era, the New Generation, the Attitude Era, the Invasion, Ruthless Aggression, the PG Era, the Reality Era, the Modern Era, whatever that's called. Many wouldn't immediately associate the Phenom with the New Generation, but take a closer look and you'll see that some quite memorable Undertaker moments and matches took place during this time period. The one I want to bring up here is the Buried Alive match from In Your House 11. Mankind had the Undertaker's number, beating the Dead Man at the King of the Ring and at SummerSlam earlier in the year, with a little help from Paul Bearer. It had been quite some time since someone truly stepped up to the Phenom, and things had gotten so heated between these two that the WWF decided to hold a non-sanctioned Buried Alive match where the loser would get put 6 feet under. Taker won the match, but a bunch of heels decided to bury the Dead Man for good at the very end of the show. Taker, of course, would come back and get some revenge at the Survivor Series. For the bad Undertaker match, I'm gonna go with his rematch against Giant Gonzalez at SummerSlam 1993. People seem to forget that these two had another pay-per-view match, and I think that's because of the way we study the WrestleMania streak, and the Gonzalez match at Mania 9 standing out as one of the absolute worst matches that took place during the Undertaker's historic string of victories. But the SummerSlam 1993 match is just as bad. Big Jorge tried, he really did, but he was pretty rotten in the ring, and not even the Undertaker could squeeze a good match out of El Gigante, try as he might. At least this one had Paul Bearer hitting a sick clothesline on Harvey Whippleman though. There's a bit of debate about when exactly the New Generation began. Some say it's the 1992 Survivor Series with the Bret Hart vs Shawn Michaels main event. Others say it began at WrestleMania 9. But I, like some others, like to think it began the day Hulkamania died in the WWF during the 1993 King of the Ring. Yokozuna had a historically significant match against WWF champion Hulk Hogan at the pay-per-view, and after Hogan had swooped in at WrestleMania 9 to grab the WWF championship even though he wasn't advertised in the main event, there were quite a few fans and wrestlers who thought the Hulkster had brought the WWF backwards instead of forwards. Hulk Hogan didn't stay around for too long in 1993, and he dropped the belt to Yokozuna at the King of the Ring after getting a fireball to the face. It's not a technical masterpiece, nor will it rank high in many people's best Yokozuna or Hulk Hogan matches, but it is a must-see match for those who want to study the eras of pro wrestling. Hogan leaving the company was big news, and the WWF would finally shift focus onto other talent immediately following his departure. All in all, it was probably the best thing the Hulkster could do at the time. He would end up signing a ridiculous contract with WCW, and he became a part of one of wrestling's most important factions. As for Big Yokozuna, he ended up having a long title run that lasted all the way to WrestleMania 10. As for Yokozuna's bad match, I'm going to go with In Your House 4, Yokozuna vs Mabel. Sorry Mabel. Yoko had put on even more weight around this time period, and if you think Mabel was having bad matches with the likes of The Undertaker and Diesel, just imagine how bad things would get when he tried working with a guy who weighed more than the Phenom and Big Daddy Cool. A 5-minute match, around 1.5 minutes of that is spent actually wrestling or throwing punches and headbutts, whatever you want to call it. And most of the time is spent with both guys getting knocked out of the ring and both guys taking their sweet time to start fighting again. The ending is odd too. Sir Mo attacks Jim Cornette from behind. Cornette was Yoko's manager at the time, and Yoko trips and lands on Cornette. The ref calls for the bell after both guys get counted out, then the two competitors decide to hug it out. Maybe there were plans here for a future tag team, but Big Yoko was being sent home frequently to try and lose weight, so nothing came of this. Mabel's days in the company too were numbered. It's a painful match to sit through, and it done neither man any favours. The Kid debuted in the WWF in 1993 as a job guy just after WrestleMania 9, but a surprise victory against Razor Ramon quickly catapulted Sean Waltman up the cards. Maybe fans were more happy to see the bad guy get pinned, but either way, the victory done wonders for the Kid's career, and because Waltman was given a chance, he was able to show off what he could actually do inside the ring. No better opportunity arose when the Kid got a WWF title match against Bret the Hitman Hart on Raw, airing on the 11th of July 1994. Taking up over half of the Raw broadcast, this one featured a babyface underdog going up against a babyface world champion. Not something you see all the time. Understanding the unique position they were in, Bret and Kid told a brilliant story through this match, with Hart getting constantly surprised by Kid's abilities. What we end up getting is one of the most technically sound matches you'll ever see in the World Wrestling Federation, and it's made all the better because it takes place on Raw, allowing much more fans to see the bout at the time. Both guys gained each other's respect after the final bell, and both guys still speak fondly of the match, with Kid saying this match against Hart was what truly helped to make him a superstar. In Your House 5, on the other hand, featured a match where Kid's strengths were not highlighted, and this was because he turned heel at the time. As part of the $1 Million Corporation, Kid teamed up with Psycho Sid to do battle with former friend Razor Ramon and Marty Jannetty. You look at this one on paper without any context and you wonder how on earth these two teams came to be, and you also think about how different the teammates are, but yeah, watch it back yourself and you'll see what I mean. No chemistry in either team. Everything about the match is instantly forgettable, and the WWF were too busy building up the Razor Ramon vs Goldust rivalry throughout the bout, with the Bizarre One sitting in the audience and even cutting a split screen promo. Man, I've talked about Bret Hart way too much on this channel, but it's for good reason too. One of my all-time favourites, and as a kid, I couldn't get enough of the Hitman. I'd watch his matches consistently. Bret's already been featured twice in this video and about 200 times on this channel. It's a testament to how good he was against multiple opponents. And Bret had a string of great matches during the New Generation, but one I'd like to highlight here is one I haven't talked about much before, and that's his match against Davey Boy Smith at In Your House 5. You didn't see much blood in the World Wrestling Federation during the New Generation era, nor before it, and you don't need blood to make a good wrestling match, but when it's used right and when you don't see much of it beforehand, then it can truly amplify a match and give it much more drama. This is the perfect example right here. It was almost shocking to see the Hitman completely covered in blood, and it makes the match way more gripping. Bret felt that this match was overlooked, and Vince had totally forgotten how hard he worked at In Your House 5, seeing as McMahon was too busy giving Shawn Michaels all the attention as we moved into 1996. And I also feel that even today, the match is kinda overlooked by fans, but don't be sleeping on this one. Just like Survivor Series 1995 the month prior, Bret once again put on a much more mature matchup that wouldn't have been out of place in the Attitude Era. The bad Bret Hart match I'm going with is his title shot at In Your House 12 against Psycho Sid. I reviewed this pay-per-view in depth for Reliving the War, and I was a little taken back with how bad the main event was. Actually, bad might not be the right word, but both guys were just off during this main event, and there were a few timing issues that you just don't normally see in Bret Hart matches. It surprised me just how poorly both guys performed. Shawn Michaels jumps on the apron and he costs Bret Hart the match. Seems like Big Sid has appeared in this video quite a few times already, unfortunately, but the big man did have good matches, you just need to look a bit harder to find them. The Heartbreak Kid became the leader of the New Generation after winning the title at WrestleMania 12, and the amount of fan support Shawn received in 1996 was incredible. True, fans soon got tired of HBK, and I think a lot of that has to do with how Vince McMahon pushed him down everyone's throats for months on end. But HBK led the pack for a fair portion of 96, and he had some great matches too during the whole New Generation era. His match against Mankind at In Your House 10 Mind Games is simply phenomenal. The purpose of the Mankind match was to show another side of Shawn Michaels. Practically everyone could see that the pretty boy thing was getting a little tiresome, and so Mankind and Shawn came up with a match where HBK would get a little more vicious. The bout escalates as each minute passes by. Foley takes some seriously rough looking bumps. Shawn also looks like he's in trouble more than once, and we end up with this great mix of athleticism and violence that turns out to be an all-time classic. Both Shawn and Mankind said this was one of the best matches they ever had, with Mankind at one point saying it was the absolute best. And with the amount of matches that these two have had over their long careers, their statements regarding in-your-house mind games shouldn't be taken lightly. A bad Shawn Michaels match during the New Generation era? I'll go with the Vader match at SummerSlam 1996. Most people know the story here and I won't go into too much detail, but Vader was an absolute monster in WCW and in Japan, and somehow Michaels was able to tame the monster by berating him. That one spot in the match where Shawn gets mad and he legit kicks Vader in the head after a failed top rope spot, that's a real shitty thing to see. HBK was a dick here, no doubt, and you can just see how powerful he was backstage when a mammoth like Vader has to keep himself in check when around the Heartbreak Kid. I'm a big Shawn Michaels fan, but this stuff here was definitely not best for business. The WWF could have done a lot with Vader, but instead, this match right here pretty much put an end to any future WWF Championship plans for the big man, and it's an absolute shame. Old Flexi Lexi was lined up to replace Hulk Hogan as the new generation's American hero, because every wrestling company needs an American hero. It's been said that Lex wasn't too motivated when travelling on the Lex Express, and he didn't really grab his opportunity by the balls and make the most of it. Instead, he couldn't really be asked and he just kinda got on with it. Vince McMahon decided to instead go back to Bret Hart as WWF champion, and the Lex Luger experiment pretty much ended with 0 WWF title reigns. Actually, he had no title reigns at all while in the World Wrestling Federation. Still, I wanted to include Lex here because of the whole Hulk Hogan replacement thing. Lexomania didn't run wild in the end, but it's interesting to go back and take a look at what the WWF tried to do with the total package. A good Luger match during the New Generation era? That's actually pretty tough. His best matches took place in the NWA and WCW, but I'm going to throw out a match you may not have seen or you've maybe completely erased from memory. Lex Luger vs Diesel for the Intercontinental title, 18th of July 1994, Monday Night Raw. Bet you weren't expecting that. Luger had to overcome the odds in this one. Not only did Lex have to deal with the big man, but he also had to deal with HBK on the outside. Still, the crowd goes nuts when Luger pulls off his power moves, and they went even more crazy when Lex almost had the match won. Unfortunately, the referee was down when Lex applied the torture rack, and HBK hit sweet back of the head music on Luger. Razor Ramon got involved too, and the referee ended up ruling this one a double DQ. Good fun though, a very lively audience makes this one worth a watch, and JR's commentary also adds to the bout. For Lex's bad match, I want to say the SummerSlam 1993 title match against Yokozuna, but that bout wasn't so bad. The finish was brutal, but the match itself isn't awful. So instead, I'll say the Allied Powers versus Jacob and Eli Blue at WrestleMania 11. WrestleMania's opening match should always excite fans, and it should get viewers pumped up for the remainder of the show. Luger and Bulldog as a team was an idea that I liked, and I also really liked their theme song. But man, this was a bad match no matter what way you look at it. Very forgettable, very underwhelming, and it kinda shows us how far Luger had fallen in the WWF when you compare this performance to WrestleMania 10. Again, I like the idea of the Allied Powers and I wish they got a longer run, but their big showcase match at WrestleMania turned out to be pretty poor. The bad guy Razor Ramon, another one of my favourite wrestlers of all time and a guy that arguably made a name for himself in the World Wrestling Federation. Diamond Stud in WCW didn't get as many opportunities as the bad guy, and honestly, I feel Razor could have been a good world champion in the WWF if he was given the opportunity. Razor is a face of the New Generation. His colourful attires, his character, his theme music, everything about Razor Ramon just sums up the good side of the New Generation for me, and he's one of those rare wrestlers that I could watch over and over again. Anyway, the good Razor Ramon match, I'd probably get destroyed if I didn't mention the WrestleMania 10 ladder match, but I'm gonna go with something else instead. The IC title match on Raw pitting the bad guy against the model Rick Martel. Razor and Martel were the final two guys in a battle royal that took place the week before on Raw. The model and the bad guy then had a match to crown a new IC champion, seeing as Shawn Michaels had been stripped of the title for, in kayfabe, a failure to defend the belt. Martel and Razor worked hard in their Raw one-on-one match. The only thing I wish was different was the match being just a little bit longer. You've got the veteran Rick Martel looking for one more shot at glory, while Razor, the clear fan favourite, wanted to win the IC Championship for the first time in his career. Razor hits a nasty looking Razor's Edge to win the match, and with Razor now winning the IC title and Shawn holding the other IC title at home, the two would put both belts on the line to crown an undisputed Intercontinental Champion at WrestleMania. I already mentioned the bad Razor Ramon match earlier from In Your House 5, and trying to think of another poor Razor match during the New Generation is also harder than what you might think. Without dipping into jobber territory and Raw squash matches, I'd have to go with Razor Ramon vs Jeff Jarrett at WrestleMania 11. In the end, there was nothing really wrong with Ramon vs Double J, but the fact that the blow-off WrestleMania match between these two ended in a disqualification just felt kinda lazy. Like other matches at WrestleMania 11, there's really nothing to talk about. It's a wrestling match, it ends in a DQ, it's pretty standard, and if the DQ finish was always the plan, then Razor vs Jarrett for the IC title shouldn't have happened at WrestleMania. We have two more spots left to fill, and I'll give one of those spots to Owen Hart. Owen's initial WWF run as the Blue Blazer helped him break into the company, and after disappearing for a little while, he came back and formed tag teams with Jim Neidhart and Coco Beware, known as the New Foundation and High Energy respectively. Owen truly broke out as a single star during the New Generation though, thanks to his rivalry with Big Brother Bret. And like the Razor vs Shawn ladder match, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention the Owen vs Bret WrestleMania 10 bout, which could very well be considered the greatest match of Owen's career. But I'll also mention a different match, one that can go under the radar. Bret and Owen vs the Steiner Brothers, a 25-minute dark tag team match that ended up getting released on home video. This one took place just before Owen and Bret broke up at the 1994 Royal Rumble. It isn't as good as what you'd expect, it's even better. A low-key classic, years ahead of its time, and a match style you wouldn't find commonly during the beginning of 1994. The match can be found on the WrestleFest 1994 videotape, which, at the time of making this video, is not on the WWE Network nor Peacock. What a shame that is. Luckily, a few heroes uploaded the video to other platforms, so it isn't hard to find. Mat wrestling, chain wrestling, big Steiner suplexes. The Harts getting frustrated because they're facing guys just as proficient as they are in the ring. One of the best WWF tag team matches you'll ever see, yet one the WWF hasn't made widely available. Go check it out. Picking a bad Owen Hart match doesn't feel right at all, and I legit struggled with this. Again, not wanting to pick out squash matches on Raw or Superstars. So I'm going to go with Owen vs Diesel, again at In Your House 5. Diesel just lost the championship to Bret, and Big Daddy Cool was in a bad mood. He became a tweener immediately following the Survivor Series match, and he promised to bring back the old Diesel of 1994. Owen tries his best to work at a fast pace, but Diesel just shrugs off every piece of Owen's offense, and this one becomes a glorified 4.5-minute squash match on pay-per-view. I understand the WWF were trying to rebuild Diesel, and hey, they could have done a good job of it too had Kevin not decided to leave. But Owen Hart was the sacrificial lamb here. Owen takes a jackknife, the referee tries to stop Diesel but he gets shoved away, and Owen gets planted once again. Owen wins via DQ thanks to the referee push. This one was all about Diesel getting revenge for Shawn Michaels after Owen injured HBK with an enziguri. They could have built Owen up a little after the injury and struck gold twice, with both Shawn and Owen coming out better, but no, this was some short-sighted booking right here at In Your House 5. We'll end it by going in a different direction. A wrestler who was great in the ring, he had a character who was definitely memorable, and a character that seems to be quite polarizing, just like the New Generation itself. Doink, like it or not, is an unforgettable character of the new generation, and definitely one of the more successful batshit crazy gimmicks that came out of the era. Sure, he didn't win belts and his babyface work was maybe more annoying than entertaining, but nobody who watched wrestling during this era could ever forget Matt Bourne's portrayal of the Doink character, and that's either a good thing or a bad thing, whatever way you want to look at it. Even casual fans would know who he is. Is there a Doink match that is absolutely must see? Probably not. The WrestleMania 9 Crush match, I consider that to be just a little too early for the true beginning of the new generation, although many would disagree. Just to be safe, I'll avoid that classic encounter and instead, I'm going to pick his match with Marty Jannetty on the June 21st, 1993 episode of Raw. This is a 2 out of 3 falls match that doesn't sound great on paper, but you'll be surprised at how well these two work together. Matt uses way more of his wrestling ability here instead of leaning too heavily into the character. Yes, you still get some wacky Doink nonsense, but it's kept to a minimum throughout most of the match. Doink does have to go back to his evil ways to pick up the victory, but in terms of Matt Bourne showcasing what he could do in a WWF ring, I don't think it gets any better than this match right here. I know what you're thinking, just go and watch the match. Bad Doink matches, I'm gonna go with the Survivor Series 1994 match with the Mini Doinks and Jerry Lawler's Little Royal Family. Yes, I know this isn't Matt Bourne anymore playing the Doink character, but I just have to bring this one up. It was supposed to be a comedy match, but what the WWF finds funny and what fans find funny can be two very different things. You've got the Little Doinks and the Little Royals running over Lawler while chasing each other around the ring, Doink putting a Burger King hat on Lawler's head, the Little Royals inadvertently hitting the King, mini wrestlers doing synchronized running while in the ring. There's so much shit here that just isn't funny, and you'll want to stop watching wrestling for a good few weeks after witnessing this absolute travesty. Don't even let your curiosity get the better of you if you haven't seen this already. Avoid it for your own sanity. And that was 10 wrestlers of the new generation, along with one good match and one not so good match for each superstar. Again, I like the new generation, and I think some people only think of the bad stuff when looking back at the era, but hopefully you'll click away from this video with a few matches to check out, and maybe, if you weren't a fan of the era, you might have noticed that it really wasn't all that bad. Maybe the bad outweighs the good, maybe the ridiculous mid-card characters of the era was enough to make you quit watching wrestling for a while. The numbers definitely show that people did in fact switch the channel during this time period, but there were good matches during the new generation, and there were superstars who climbed the ranks and made names for themselves during these trying times in the World Wrestling Federation. Let me know your memories of the new generation in the comments. I want to put together another video looking at some of the truly bad stuff that took place during the era, including all those bad characters mentioned at the top of the video. So give me your feedback and look out for community posts on the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and take care.